Hi everyone, I'm Alistair Ben and you're watching Expressive Photography. What type of photographer are you? Would you label yourself to be a landscape photographer? I think it's very common when you're a professional photographer to label yourself as something. And I know that I've fallen foul of this in the past in that you feel that you're limited somehow by being a certain type of photographer. Now, one of the things that I've realized since we've moved out to the Isle of Lewis here is that the concept I had of the type of photographer I was when I was on the island, when I was running workshops here before we moved here, was that the time of year I was here tended to be the autumn or over the winter or at the very latest, the early spring. And those times of the year are typified with storms and dramatic light and God beams and drama. And every time I've been out in the island, I've tended to be photographing wildness and lots of energy. Now, of course, at this time of year, in the middle of summer, the sun is rising just after 4 o'clock in the morning and it's not setting again until 10:30 at night. And if you want to be out in golden hour, you're on for some pretty early starts, late nights, or in fact, overnights. And the weather here over the summer has been kind of poor. We've had lots of cloud, we've had quite a bit of rain, it's been quite cold, but it hasn't been stormy, it's just been kind of flat. So I haven't had the opportunity to get out in the golden hour or even the blue hour. So what I was realizing was that the conditions that I was relying on to be expressive and creative, I was going to have to wait a couple of months, and I don't want to take time away from being creative. I want to be creative 365 days of the year. And even the word photographer can be a limit. I want to be creative. I want to have a creative outlook to my life because the benefits of being creative outweigh the benefits of not being creative. It's the same as eating nothing but junk food versus eating healthy food. The benefits are obvious. So I found myself last week looking out at somewhat a sunny day. It was rather pleasant and the wind had dropped and it just looked really, really nice. And I thought to myself, I want to get out and photograph what I can photograph at this time of year. When I look out the window, the Machar, the grassland, out here in the Outer Hebrides, are covered in wildflowers right now. There's a range of orchids, there's buttercups, there's red clover, there's any number of different flowers out there at the moment. And I thought, well, let's go out there and try and photograph them. But I am limited with the equipment that I have. When I switched to the Fuji GFX 100 Mark II, the longest lens I have is this 100 to 200 millimeter zoom, and its minimal focal distance at 200 meters is quite far. It's 1.6 meters, which is absolutely lousy for flower photography. So I don't have a dedicated macro lens for this camera, and at £2,500, I'm not horribly motivated to buy one, given the fact that I don't do a huge amount of macro photography. I did buy a set of extension tubes when I bought the GFX, and this is a 45mm extension tube, which does reduce the minimal focal distance down to about 0.5 meter, but it can affect light. It does sometimes reduce the amount of light that you have available to you. So recently, Case, who of course I'm an ambassador for, sent me one of these, which is a close-up lens. And this close-up lens is basically a magnifying glass. And you may have seen a video from Adam Gibbs recently where he was out using one, and a few of the other Case ambassadors that I know have been reviewing this as well. And basically this magnifying lens screws onto the front of a 77mm thread. It comes with two step-up rings, 67 to 77 and 72 to 77, but it's only a 77mm. So I couldn't use this on my 45 to 100 because that's an 82mm thread. So it only works on lenses up to 77mm. But what it's done is it's reduced the minimal focal distance of my 100 to 200mm lens down to about 40 centimeters, so about that. which has given me an awful lot of magnification, which has been ideal to go and roll around in the Macher looking at wildflowers. Here are a few of the images that I made while I was out there, and the yellows and greens of summer are not my favorite color palette. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I prefer yellower or warmer colors or predominantly cooler colors. So the yellow and the green of the raw file here, I might actually be able to show you so that is the raw file, and as you can see, it's pretty yellow and pretty green, and I decided to go down the route of making quite a high contrasty black and white version. And I actually really like this photograph. This is just photographing straight down, looking straight down on these flowers and shooting quite high ISO. That's 1000 ISO at f5.6. And I'm delighted. You know, the actual sharpness and resolution of the files is great. I didn't notice any lack of sharpness or edge sharpness or anything like that using this this close-up lens. The bottom line is this is an £89 lens as opposed to a £2,500 macro lens. I think these extension tubes are £250, so it's a cheap thing. And I was worried about putting something this cheap in front of a £2,500 lens, but that was a needless concern. One of the things that this close-up lens does do is minimize your depth of field. I mean, it's absolutely minute. I put the camera into manual focus and just using the focus wheel with sharpness or focus alerts on in the camera, so I could see exactly where in the frame was being focused, and it allowed me to create some really intimate images. This is a thing called cow parsley. It's not a particularly pretty flower in my opinion, but I did like the kind of structures of this, and again going into black and white to get rid of that kind of more normal feel. If we compare this again, the colors are quite muted. The sun was in at the time. I actually quite like the color version of this as well. So either or, and I think that's at the time I was processing it, I went down a black and white route. But looking at it now, the color version, I really don't mind either. So at the end of the day, I think this is another thing, is that by being open, you can find all kinds of different ways to express yourself. I did find a Hebridean marsh orchid. These are endemic to the Outer Hebrides. They're only found here. And I was very, very happy to find this. I only found one, and ironically yesterday when Anne and I were out for a walk, I found loads of them. So I might go out again next week and try and get some better shots of these. I only found this one, and it wasn't in an ideal location. I got very wet feet basically making this one. But again, I was able to get really, really close to this subject. This next shot here, I think I've included it to bring the point forward that why do we make photographs in the first place? And for me, escapism is a huge part of it. Life is stressful. There's any number of things on a daily basis that are demanding our attention, that can stress us out, that are out of our control. And one of the things I love to go into nature for is to be engaged with something outside of my own head. And when you're lying on the ground, looking through a viewfinder and playing with depth of field, you suddenly lose yourself in the bokeh. And this transition from sharp and detailed in the front through to this completely blurred out background, it's just a playground. I mean, there were people walking past and I was just lying on the ground oblivious, just sucked in through the viewfinder. And the benefits for mental health here are just massive. So whether the photographs themselves turn into something that you're proud of or you want to share with other people, I think that's almost irrelevant. One of the things I forgive myself for on a daily basis is to go out and make photographs for me and only for me. And yeah, sometimes I make images that I'm so happy with, I do want to share them. And sharing is an important part of photography, but not every photograph needs to be shared. And this one here, for example, it's not a great composition. You know, these big, heavy red clover flowers in the foreground are very dominant. I can't crop this in any way to kind of make it more concise without losing things that I would want to keep. So this is very much a photograph for me, but I loved it. I loved the time I spent making it. And that's enough for me at the end of the day. So maybe one of the takeaways from this video is that you can go into the landscape and make photographs just for yourself, just to have the pleasure of making them. We don't have to knock it out of the park every single time we go out. And I think the point of this video is to say you can be a 365 days of the year photographer without labeling or limiting yourself to being just a landscape photographer, just a wide-angled photographer, just a majestic landscapes photographer, just someone who goes to iconic locations to take the shot that's going to impress everybody. Photography is good for our mental health. Photography is good for us to go out, to see the world, to articulate our perceptions and perspectives. And by cutting out an awful lot of clutter, by cutting out an awful lot of the big picture, you can lose yourself through the barrel of your lens, through the viewfinder of your camera, and escape from the world. And that feels good to me. The final photograph is actually a little creek that was running through the meadow there, the Machar, beautiful Gaelic word for the coastal grasslands here in the Outer Hebrides. And I really love the way the light is reflecting off the surface here. Again, super shallow depth of field. I actually tried to focus in here. So the range of focus is very, very small, but it's not a photograph about detail. It's a photograph about flow. Both the literal flow of the river and the stream and the way that the underwater vegetation is being wafted around and moved around by the flow of the water, but equally the flow state of losing yourself through the viewfinder. I really hope in the videos that I make here on Expressive Photography YouTube channel to inspire and motivate people to break down barriers of labels that restrict what they can do. I want you to be free. I want you to experience the world and to go out and make all kinds of different photographs, because you will undoubtedly make things that both surprise you and surprise viewers of your images. This is the superpower of being a photographer. I nearly said landscape photographer. This is the superpower of being a photographer. We have at our disposal a tool that manipulates and warps reality. This is not what that stream really looked like, although I've hardly processed this at all. This is a distorted view of the world, which is limited or being limited by the tool that we're using. So by using something like this, a close-up lens, to get in tight, to get in much, much closer to the world, you can start making perspectives of things that most people are going to just walk past. I do hope you find this useful. Let me know in the comments, do you get value from these videos? Do you get value by the type of content that I'm making for you? I do hope so. If you do, then please hit the subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, hit the bell notifications so that you will receive notifications when we release new content. But that's it for today. I'm looking forward to getting out again in the next few days to make some more images out here on the Isle of Lewis. Autumn isn't far away. August is definitely an autumn month here on the island. So I do continue to look forward to bringing you some new content every week. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. But until then, bye for now.